Welcome to Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. My name is Amanda, and my lovely co-host is...
Hello, I'm Meagan.
Hey, we are your progressive, secular, and imperfect homeschool podcast. If you're tired of homeschool influencers with perfectly clean houses and glamorous blowouts, no blowouts here, who appear to have it all together, you're in the right place. We aren't those people, and we're glad to have you. So, our topic today is why we should all care more about neurodivergence. And trust us, even if you don't have a neurodivergent child, this episode absolutely applies to you. So stick around, right? We're going to talk about all kinds of good things. This is definitely not just I have a neurodivergent kiddo, I'm going to listen, or I don't, this isn't me. But first, let's dive into our recap of the week to prove just how messed up we are. So how about you, Meagan? What do you got?
Oh my goodness, where am I at? I've been getting more sleep this week, which has been great. That's not to say that I've been going to bed at a reasonable hour, because I absolutely have not been. But I haven't had early morning stuff, which has been great because we're not morning people. But I had kind of a run last week where it was like somebody was coming to look at the air conditioner, or I had to go somewhere, or my kid had an appointment. And so I was going to bed at my usual ridiculous bedtime because I was up late getting stuff done or whatever. And then I had to be up early. So it was like really snowballing into a situation where I was reaching meltdown levels. So that's been good. I've gotten some more sleep. And then I've been getting a ton of work done, which always feels good. I watched a thing on Netflix. I haven't even had a chance to talk to you about it. I talked to a mutual friend of ours. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it properly. The Decameron or something. It's set in Florence during the 1300s, during the Black Plague. It is so hilarious and irreverent. It's just absolutely fantastic. Like, it's weird and it's quirky, and I don't know, I loved it so much that I'm thinking about just kind of, we talked last week or the week before about background noise and screens. Totally thinking about making it one of my background noise TV shows because it was good. I liked it. So yeah, so it's been a pretty good week. I desperately need to go grocery shopping. The meal that I ate before our podcast was quite the hodgepodge of events, but I'll worry about that later. So overall, it's been a pretty good week. I noticed you have a change of surroundings. So how's your week, Amanda? Are you in a new location?
Yeah, I'm back home. I'm back home in SoCal. So we spent the last 4 weeks exactly. We were doing the math. So exactly 4 weeks in the Midwest, visiting family and traveling around with them and doing different things and seeing different things. And we had a good time. But you know, some trips are real life on the road, right? Because we're part-time world schoolers, and some trips you disconnect a little bit more. And this trip I definitely disconnected. But then there was still like the family stuff, right? My brother and his family live close to my parents, and so we were doing all of that. And then we were also still traveling and going to places and seeing things and all of these kinds of things. And so I dropped the ball on a lot of things. I stayed on top of some things. And then we did not travel. We didn't fly home when we were planning because there was that whole like flights were a huge mess and whatever. So we pushed it out, hoping that when we did actually travel home, our layover wouldn't be terrible, because where my parents live, there's no direct flight to any major airport that's useful. So that did not work, right? All the best laid plans. We had our layover, we had delays, we sat on the tarmac forever. We landed in SoCal, we sat on the tarmac again forever because like the gates weren't working. I mean, it was all just, it was life, right? That's how life works. But that does not change the fact that it completely kicked my ass. I have talked before about the fact that I have a lot of chronic illnesses, and one of those is a combination of chronic fatigue syndrome as well as post-exertional malaise, PEM. And so a great big travel day that went hours longer than I expected has completely knocked me on my butt. And I too was up late last night trying to make sure that I finished all the things I needed to do for podcasting today. So we're here. But I finally logged on to all of our shared accounts because podcasting is one of the things that I super dropped the ball on. And when I logged on, I saw that we got our first Buy Me a Coffee from Jessica. So, Jessica, thank you so much. It totally made my morning when I was very much like, I fucking hate this podcast. Why did I agree to do this? um, it's super. It was really exciting. So, thank you for that. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, that is, I know we get giddy over everything. So we're like, yay, people are responding, people listen. It's so exciting. So thank you, Jessica. We appreciate your kind words and you taking the time and the effort and the donation. So thank you so much.
That's it. It was the little message, right? Like,
Exactly.
I am not kidding. This morning when I was like really trying to rally for like, okay, I have to get up. I have to do these things. I have to put on real clothes. I just have to buckle down and do it. And then I accidentally clicked into the email, which I did not mean to do, but I was trying to get my computer booted back up. And then I saw the nicest message of like, love the podcast, keep it going, like, and I was like, damn it. But okay.
I can do this. I can do this.
Yeah, I can do it. Let me go get a cup of tea. I got it. So yeah, perfect.
Well, I have, so I do not feel like you dropped the ball on podcasting because you answered all of my whacked out messages the whole time. I did, but I did hold a bunch back so that you could disconnect. So I was telling Amanda right before we went live, I'm like, I have an Amanda list of all things that are not urgent. And I'm like, I know travel days are hard and that you need time to, so I'm like, when you're recovered, I have a small list, but no, you did not drop the ball. You're amazing. So thank you.
Small list. It's going to be like 2 Excel spreadsheets long. Let's be real. I've worked with Meagan long enough to know that a small list is not a small list.
It's a little bit, right? But it's not. It's little stuff, I promise. Yeah, so it's all good. Including if this makes you feel good, one of the things that's on there is taking a holiday break and some ideas for content during the holiday break that we could like pre-record. So look at that. There's a break. There's a break on the horizon, right? Because everybody knows during the holidays, all of us are like, it's just too much anyway. So it'll be good. We have a great fall coming for you though. So it's going to be awesome.
We do, for sure.
So our topic for today is neurodivergence. And we have touched on it in some of our reading, or sometimes it'll come, sometimes when we're just talking about our books, like even our transcript book, like we talk about how that might look different if your homeschooler is autistic or dyslexic or something like that, right? So we try to kind of infuse those things into conversation because the reality is there are a ton of homeschoolers who are neurodivergent, because the school system is not amazing at handling neurodivergence in a lot of ways, right? So our population as homeschoolers is probably, I would say, disproportionately neurodivergent in a lot of ways. There's not a lot of statistics on it, but just anecdotally going to homeschool groups and, you're like, oh, my kid's this, my kid that, my kid this, my kid that, right? So there's a lot of us that have taken our kids' education into our own hands because the school system was like, I don't know what to do with this kid. You figure it out kind of thing. Yeah. So, although in my case, it was more like, I don't know what to do with this kid, but you're clearly not up to it either. And I was like, I'm going to have to disagree with you on that. I feel like I am. So, the reality is, even if you don't have a neurodivergent kid, we as a society really need to get a better grip on this topic, right? We talked a little bit about it in our author interview with Jonathan Mooney and about kind of the activism that is tied to neurodivergence. There have been other movements in the past, right? Like if you look in the 60s, 70s, 80s, what resulted in the Americans with Disabilities Act, where it's this huge movement of disabled individuals fighting for accommodation, equality, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's kind of this piece of that going on with neurodivergence right now. And we all kind of need to be a part of it. It's kind of like being a feminist, even if you're not a female. You can be a neurodivergent activist, even if you are not that person, if it's not directly affecting your family. Although statistically speaking, the odds are pretty good that there's something in your family, maybe not your immediate nuclear family, but a sibling, a cousin, your parents, whatever. There's somebody there that's neurodivergent.
If you're parenting a neurodivergent kiddo, you're likely already pretty familiar with some of what we'll be discussing today. However, we are both parenting neurodivergent kids, and we are both still soaking up every piece of information we can find, right? Anytime a new book comes out or there's a new seminar or a new podcast, we're constantly sharing things, we're constantly learning, because there's always something new to think about or to integrate into what you're doing or a new way to think about things. And so we just want to make sure that as we work to support our amazing kiddos in the best possible way, we're trying to help share that with other folks and, really kind of just help bring better awareness to the struggles that we all have, whether you are neurodivergent or neurotypical, parenting a neurodivergent kiddo, or maybe you and your kiddo are both neurotypical, but they have a classmate that they're struggling with, or someone from one of your play groups, or whatever that is. The goal here is to just help with understanding, right? Compassionate understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and totally kind of off topic, but I went to Homeschooling Unleashed a bit ago, and there was a speaker whose presentation that I sat through, and they didn't identify themselves as neurodivergent. They don't owe me a diagnosis, but parenting three neurodivergent kids, I was like, I'm pretty sure this guy, et cetera, right? And it was interesting because I had to keep kind of reminding myself to focus on his content and not his delivery style, because his delivery style was impacted by however his brain operates, as all of us, right? I mean, all of us are, the way we communicate, it says a lot about that. And so, yeah, even in a situation like that, it would have been really easy to walk away from that presentation and be like, I don't know, but the content was really great. It was just a matter of kind of navigating his delivery style. So yeah, I mean, we're going to interact with people of all different neurotypes in the world. So it's important for us to acknowledge that.
Absolutely.
So likely when we say neurodivergent, your brain jumps to the usual cast of characters, right? Autism, ADHD, dyslexia are probably the big three. And if you're pretty immersed in that world, you might also branch out into like dyspraxia or sensory processing disorder or dysgraphia, right? There's a bunch of others that are in there, but there's some surprise ones too.
Yeah. So would it surprise you to know that the diagnoses of traumatic brain injury, Tourette's, and giftedness are also considered neurodivergent? The neurodivergent umbrella is far reaching, but at its core, it simply means a person's brain is wired differently. It makes different connections than what we consider standard or typical. Not better, not worse, just different. So one of these days, we're actually going to do the book called Differently Wired for our book club. I'm going to make Meagan do it. It is easily one of my absolute favorite parenting books. It changed so many things for me. I have a few. I only have a handful of parenting books that I'm like, these are so important for people to read. And this makes my list of top 3 parenting books. So that idea, differently wired, right? Again, it's not better. It's not worse. Everyone has strengths. Everyone has weaknesses. It's just different.
Mm-hmm. I do. I love that book. I'm totally game. I'll reread it anytime you want. Absolutely love it. In fact, I take one of my major life mantras from that book, which is the author talks about there's no heart in the cooler. And that's her reminder to herself, like, especially with her job, that she's not transporting live organs. Nobody's life is on the line. And sometimes we can get so worked up in the nuance of day-to-day stuff. And I love that. Like sometimes I'll get myself a little, and I'm like, oh, there's no heart in the cooler. This is all going to be fine. It's okay. Yeah. So that was life. That was not from a parenting perspective. I did take parenting stuff from it, but that was life-changing for me as a person, just in general, being like, it was like my version of don't sweat the small stuff. That didn't sink in. That didn't affect me the same way, but there's no heart in the cooler is my version. Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's my don't sweat the small stuff. So we have a lot of info to share today, but before we dive in, we want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Hub of Curiosity. We like to share a little bit about their classes, and given the topic of this week, we thought it was the perfect time to highlight some of their classes that are neurodivergent affirming. Not all resources are neurodivergent affirming. When we did Normal Sex with Jonathan Mooney, you heard about plenty of ways that neurodivergent individuals are made to feel less than, like garbage, stupid, etc., none of which is true. This is not the case with Hub of Curiosity. They offer neurodivergent social clubs where kids can unmask and show up and be their authentic selves. They offer ADHD body doubling sessions, which are amazing for task orientation, and they're led by neurodivergent educators, which is huge. They also have a tutor who's a dyslexic adult who hosts reading groups and things like that. And she literally talks to the kids about how she reads. What are the tools that she uses? What are the ways that she breaks down written communication? And there's plenty of teachers, and I'm not bashing OG Orton Gillingham. It's great. All that stuff is great, but it's a very different perspective of having a neurotypical person who learned about the reading experience versus a dyslexic person sharing their reading experience. Not better, not worse, but super valuable. So yeah, there's some awesome options over there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so you can find a link to their course catalog in the description below, or in our Instagram bio. But the more important part is, as a premier sponsor here at Homeschool Moms Unfiltered, we get to offer our listeners $15 off your first Hub of Curiosity class. So if you haven't taken advantage of that yet, definitely do. The code is of cure 115. So that's OFCUR 115, and that's $15 off any class. Obviously, since we're talking about neurodivergency today, we'd love for you to look into those, but you don't have to use it on that. It's off any of your first class that you take there. So go check them out.
And if you have a neurotypical kid, they have a really cool class too that breaks down all about neurodivergence. So like if your autistic friend is stimming or something, like what should you do as a neurotypical kid, right? How do you react? What should you say? What should you, right? Kind of that dynamic of being a good friend. So there's classes for everything related to neurodivergence over there, which is super awesome.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think, especially for homeschooling parents, it's probably really useful. I'm sure it's useful for anyone, but I know that in our specific situation, my kiddo tends to be pretty considerate and empathetic, I guess, when he picks his friends, right? And so differences, and he kind of collects neurodivergent friends. And so he's understanding, but he doesn't have a lot in his toolbox, right, of how to help with that. And of course, we talk about it and we go over different things and all of that. But he's also my kid, right? And the reality is sometimes he needs to hear it from someone else. You know, sometimes, yeah, sometimes he just needs to be taught from, you know, someone else for it to really sink in a better way. And so I think that's a great option. All right, so back into what we were actually here to talk about, right? So truly, the more you know, the better, right? So let's talk about neurodivergence. If our goal is to raise kind and compassionate kids who will make a positive change in the world, it is absolutely imperative that they understand how others experience the world, right? You cannot be compassionate if you don't give a shit about someone else's experience, right? If you don't care what it is like for them to exist in the world, you cannot even pretend to be a kind and compassionate person. It just doesn't work. So there's a tremendous component of fostering empathy in our children when it comes to this.
Okay, all I had was the visual of the jacket Melania wore. What did it say on the back? Like, I really don't care.
Yeah, I really don't care. Yeah.
That's all I had. And I was like, okay, so yeah, I mean, if your goal is not to raise caring, compassionate kids, like, we'll see you in the next
jacket
episode.
For that.
School uniform. Yeah. But if you'd like caring kids, let's talk. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So all too often in our culture, the onus is put on the neurodivergent person to conform to neurotypical standards, right? And a lot of times our neurodivergent friends are already putting in extra work anyway, right? So like my kiddo, if he's in a public space, he's most likely, again, every human being is different. So I'm not going to say what your experience is versus his, but most likely in a lot of cases, he's hearing and feeling the music way louder than the rest of the people in the room. The vibration of the music is grating on every nerve in his body. He hears fluorescent lights. He hears everything, right? So he's already having to
How often do you get that? Do you hear that? Do you hear that buzzing? Do you hear that beeping? Like, I mean, first off, I'm in my mid-40s, buddy. There's a lot of things I don't hear anymore.
Went to a lot of concerts in my day, pal. Before we knew about noise-canceling headphones and things like that, or cared, right? Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, so we went through a thing where I bought this bark machine because He has a service dog, and when we go in when she's wearing her gear and she's in public, I mean, we take her to restaurants, whatever. She gets under the table, she sits there, she lays there until she's been given her command to move. When the mailman drives past our house at the front window, shit goes down. Like, she's like, who the hell does he think he is? Right? Like, it's a very different story, right? She's still a dog. So I bought this machine on Amazon that lets out like a high pitched noise when they bark, and it's noise activated and all this kind of stuff. He could freaking hear it. He was like, I mean, immediately he could hear it. He was like, oh my gosh, you have to return that. And then on top of it, because he's an empath, he was like, he felt so much pain, or so much discomfort, I should say, really is probably the better term, from the bark machine, that he was like, there's no way you can do that to her. Like, even if I didn't hear it, and because it's uncomfortable for him. And I'll give you an example. Like, our service dog doesn't wear anything. How autistic is this? Our service dog doesn't wear anything with like buckles or straps, because Kiddo doesn't wear anything that has buttons, buckles, zippers, etc. Right? And so I have had to make all of her service gear out of fabric that he would choose to put on his body, because he doesn't want her to feel uncomfortable, right? So they're already putting in all this work because their socks are itchy, or because the music is loud, or because whatever, the lights are bright, whatever the case might be. So then if we start asking them to conform to neurotypical standards, it's like their battery is already draining, just trying to keep their head above water. And now we're saying things like, you have to communicate in this way, or you have to make eye contact, or you have to do this, or you have to do that, because that's what we as neurotypicals expect. So if we understand kind of how that person experiences the world, and kind of the strain that they might already be under in that particular situation, or the experience that they're already having, we can meet them halfway. That's kindness, that's compassion, right? Like, we could say like, or maybe it's like, would you prefer to eat outside? It is pretty loud in here. Would you prefer to eat outside? And like, just little things like that our kids might have a better understanding of if they better understand neurodivergence.
No, for sure. Absolutely. So as a society, I really think we're missing out on incredible strengths by discounting the contribution, knowledge, and talent of neurodiverse individuals. Just even beyond that, and we're going to get into this more, but just take a minute. We've talked about it before, but take a minute to think about every great person that you look up to, whether it's a classic pianist, or an artist, or a tech person, or a performer, or the Olympics, and you're looking at, these people who are doing amazing feats and overcoming their body and their mind and and all of these things, right? It's a pretty safe bet that 99.9% of those people are neurodivergent. And we don't want to think about that because they've succeeded, and we hold them up as a pinnacle of like success. And so success and neurodivergence don't go hand in hand in our society. And
no, that's not the narrative we've spun.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so if you just take a step back and even just remember that as your like entry point into neurodivergence is not a bad thing. It is not the thing that holds you back. It is just a difference. And like we said, everyone has differences. Everyone's got strengths. Everyone's got weaknesses. And just figuring out how to play on the strengths for each and every person is what actually really matters. So now, before I say anything else, here's my huge disclaimer with asterisks and flashing lights and all of that jazz, okay? Not all neurodiverse people are the same. Just like not all neurotypical people are the same, okay? These skills that I'm about to describe are generalizations. Generalizations can be helpful. There is truth in generalizations, but they are not the be-all, end-all of everything, okay? So I've said it. Don't come at me, okay? Be kind and don't come at me.
My kid has ADHD and they can't blah, blah, blah. We get that. Yeah. They're all different, right?
Mm-hmm.
No two individuals are the same.
My kid has this, but they don't have autism. Yeah, okay. Like, don't come at me. These are generalizations, and there's truth in generalizations, but they're generalizations, not 100% fact, okay? We didn't say that. Okay, so some examples of strengths with some of the more obvious ones, right? So with ADHD, you've got intense ability to focus on interests. You have character traits like creativity, spontaneity, and compassion, willingness to take risks and innovate, right? They are thinking outside the box. They're willing to try things. And yeah, it scares the shit out of you when your ADHD kiddo is like flipping off of the couch when they shouldn't be and they've broken their arm the first time, right? Yes, okay, we hear that, we get that. But the flip side is they are willing to take risks and try new things that other people wouldn't. And that is hugely beneficial in so many fields.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they work well under pressure and they're generally good at problem solving. They have a strong sense of justice, what's right and what's wrong. And they have an enhanced ability to multitask, right? There's a benefit to having so many different things going on all the time. They're used to that and they're able to harness that in a way that can be much more effective and efficient than the vast majority of us.
Strong sense of justice tends to be common across various neurodivergent diagnoses.
Yeah.
And it's funny because people talk about like, okay, so our last episode was about screens, right? And you were saying like you don't have YouTube and stuff like that. Totally, whatever. You do you, we do our thing. Awesome, both on both ends, right? My 12-year-old who's autistic ADHD is a one-child YouTube cleanup machine. I have his email logged in on my phone just in case anything comes through that I need to support him with or anything like that. The number of reports that he has made to YouTube, like, it is now safe for your kid. He's taken care of it. He's cleaned up the entire platform. Anything that comes through that violates community standards, he's on it. He's reported it. So strong sense of justice. It's happening. It's definitely happening over here. So whenever you feel ready, it's now clean. And daily. He's on it. He's keeping it clean.
Oh, if only it was that easy, right?
Exactly. Yeah, all over the place. And there is some crossover, and that's part of one of the difficulties with any parent who's tried to get diagnoses for their kids in some of these things. Oh my goodness, the Venn diagrams are endless. The crossover is endless. There's a lot happening here,
Mhm.
right? So, talking about autism, right? Strong memory for facts and figures. There's a girl, I'm terrible with names, but she's on Instagram, and she has like a very large following on Instagram. She's a girl. She's got like mid-length blonde hair. And she posted a thing recently that said like, I didn't get the trains version of autism. I got the dog version of autism. And she was at a dog show and she knew every dog breed, every fact about every dog. Like, that's her jam, right? And so that ability to go super deep and know all of that, and just, it's so much fun to watch somebody like that go when it's their topic and to just like revel in their thing. So it was a really cool video. I liked it. Enhanced perception appreciation of sensory information. So you notice the wording there, right? Like, it's not like noise bothers them, right? That's not it. It's enhanced perception. There's ways that can be super beneficial, right? There's career options. There's ways that can be pivoted into a skill. But yeah, there's a huge appreciation of sensory information. My kiddo, his sensory input is like easily 100 times what mine is. Like, and yeah, I like to use the word pendulum shift when we talk about some of this stuff, because yeah, you can harness that for good. On the flip side, there's not a pain medication in the world that works on this kid because his sensory input is so strong. So, I mean, we've literally been on like a Toradol drip in the ER for an ear infection. It's gotten so bad. So I'm not saying it's all great. Like, there are going to be sensory challenges, right? But it's there. It can be a skill in some ways as well.
And I would say, just to like kind of piggyback on that, it's another great example of why it is so important as parents to support your kiddos when people say, I don't think it's worth getting the label. I don't want them to be labeled. I don't want the diagnosis, because there are downsides, and not to be, some crazy doom or gloom, but the reality is a lot of neurodivergent people who are not helped in a productive, effective way will turn to self-medication in one way or another. And we as a society, right, we have seen how much that can spiral out of control really quickly nowadays. And so, it's worth remembering and keeping in mind that there are healthy, constructive ways to deal with this and to be aware and to educate. And then, when you choose, it doesn't matter what you're talking about, right? We could go off on all kinds of subjects and topics that if you choose not to educate your kids about it, they may end up taking the really wrong path, or making some really poor choices, trying to self-educate and self-medicate and so let's support them. Now's the time. Now's the time to support them and educate them.
Well, and I can't even tell you how many times, like if my kid was having an issue and we're somewhere, that I just need to say, he's autistic. And people's willingness to help or willingness to just let me do what needs to be done or let me tell them what I need, it's helpful to be able to say that. Like it really, really is. I mean, we had a situation, I don't remember if I've ever shared it on the podcast. We were getting ready to board the boat to the little ferry to go over to Alcatraz in San Francisco. And they wanted to put a hand stamp on my kiddo. And from a sensory perspective, that's not happening. There's never anything that's going to stamp on his body. No face paint, none of that stuff, right? And I said to the guy, it was a security thing, right? When you handed in your ticket, you went through security. They stamped you so that you knew you went through security. So I understood the need. It's that security process. I totally get it. I said, can you stamp my hand twice? And then, if anybody says anything, I'll no. And I was like, can you please? Like we'd made these reservations ages ago. There's this line of people behind you. Feel like this, like, what do I do in this moment? I was like, he's autistic. Boom, done. Oh, no problem. Stand over here. Wait in this pre-boarding area. No hand stamp, nothing, right? So sometimes there is that need for that diagnosis to just get what you need in that moment to accommodate your kid, which is a huge part of what we do. So diagnoses are amazing. They're hard to get and they're expensive to get. That's a soapbox for another day. But
yes,
it should be so easily accessible for people, but it's not.
And not just here. I will say, not just here. I was actually just talking fairly recently with a friend who lives in Australia, and she was like, how did you get that? Didn't is it actually cheaper in the States? And I was like, no, it is not. It's a private thing most of the time. You have to pay for a really good. There are some ways, and in some cases, you can get something decent from the school, but for the most part, the most useful ones, they cost thousands of dollars from professionals who actually do that day in and day out. And it wasn't part of their teaching certification,
Exactly. Right. Yeah, 100%. Well, it's interesting to know that it's like that in other places too. It makes me feel slightly less hostile about how poorly we serve our, right. At least I know it's not just us.
Yeah.
Other traits that might be commonly associated with autism might be things like logical thinking skills, deep focus when they're interested on something, which is a huge reason why when I'm in an autism and homeschooling group on Facebook, and people, what curriculum, this, that, and the other thing. Not all, never all, right? But not all autistic kids, a ton of them are great unschoolers because they love to go deep. They can memorize. They're excellent at pattern recognition. There's all of this stuff that's there. And I let mine go, and it's endless what he has done. I couldn't have even kept up with him if I was trying to dole information out. I would never have been able to keep up at the speed that he went on his own. So it's there. Pattern recognition is huge. Sense of justice is typically in there as well. And we talk a lot about autistic people, quote unquote, needing routine. A lot of times, if we kind of, again, depending, but a lot of times autistic people are great at forming their own routines, right? Like they've developed their own sense of whatever, right? And they've got rhythms and patterns and things like that. Which if you are in again, thinking adult world, thinking corporate world, thinking, career prospects, if it's something where developing schedules and routine is part of that, I mean, look at the logistics of like scheduling airplanes or something like that, right? Oh my gosh, autistic person's dream in some cases, right? Depending on how they're, what their particular interests are and what their particular skill sets are, since each person is different. But there are some tremendous ways that these innate gifts or abilities or talents or whatever you want to call them are effective in the real world, and teaching them how to leverage those can be really powerful.
For sure. Science lab work. I, when I worked in a research lab, I was not in the actual research lab, but in the organization that did a bunch of research, right? I mean, that, like the schedules and that it has to be, and the samples have to be checked at this time and these have to be done and this, that like, that was like, it was their jam, right? I knew so many folks who were somewhere on the spectrum, and and they were good at it, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those examples. If it lines up with your interests, there are plenty of options out there.
Go rock that
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah,
Temple
that's it.
Grandin is kind of a controversial figure in the world of autism for her thoughts on ABA therapy and things like that. But she makes comments about, like, without autism, there's no Silicon Valley, right?
Mhm.
Without neurodivergence, there is no tech world, right?
Mhm.
This is
Or
that
medical
neurodivergence is,
advancement,
yeah,
I mean, we'd all still be dying from cancer and, all these
having
other things,
leeches
right?
put on us.
Uh, no, for sure. Okay, so another one that we have talked about before, right? Because we did normal sucks, and so that was definitely part of this. But dyslexia is another one that is hugely misunderstood, right? People often just think, well, dyslexia, it means they can't read, right? It's not that simple. It's not that straightforward. Um, and there are plenty of good things that come with it. So some of those are enhanced spatial awareness. We had talked about this in a previous podcast. A lot of great athletes are actually dyslexic as well because they can see patterns. That's another thing that they can often, see better. Strong visual memory. All of these things come together to make them like just really great at sports, especially team sports. Um, you have character traits like observant, empathetic, and creative. They are oftentimes big picture thinkers, right? Because of the way that it's hard to look at the individual letters, this idea of like being able to look at the big picture and really pull the things out of it that matter and put back a big picture that's even better. It's really strong here. They have excellent problem solving skills and usually strong communication skills. Their verbal communication skills are usually amazing, right? And this is one of those examples. There are lots and lots of options out there, technology and things like that, that can help you translate that into the society that we live in. Just because dyslexia and reading and possibly writing, for a lot of dyslexic learners is challenging. It doesn't mean you can't use speech to text. I think everyone knows how to use it on your phone, every words processing system, like there's so many options. It's, again, you do not have to focus on just the bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's silly. It's silly. There's nowhere else in life that
Yeah,
we look at something and we only think about the bad, right?
yeah.
Like there's nowhere else in life that we do that. Don't do it here.
I follow a bunch of neurodivergent creators on social media, and some of it has come from a communication connection that I've made with my youngest kiddo, where he'll send me stuff. He sent me one time where it was like 6 different audio tracks that were all playing at different volumes, speeds, and pitches, all overlaid. It was chaos. And he said, this is before he started taking meds. This was a while ago. And he said, this is what it sounds like in my brain. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was so helpful. It was like a 15-second track on YouTube Shorts.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, right? But I follow, so, and through that, I've ended up following a bunch of neurodivergent creators because he and I kind of have this connection where we send stuff back and forth. And there was one guy who was like, yeah, I show up to work late and I don't get things done on the deadline. But he said, when you're interviewing a person, if you let me sit in, I can read that person 100 times better than you can, right? This ability to read someone. And so he's like, that's my strength. And so if you'll just, acknowledge the fact that I'm going to show up at 9:15 every day, then I can help you with my strengths elsewhere. And it's totally okay. There's a really cool video online too. I love this big picture thinker. It was how Richard Branson, who is dyslexic, started Virgin Airlines, where he said he was on a flight. He was going to, and I love his honesty. He was going to hook up with some girl in like the Bahamas or something. Very Richard Branson, right? And his flight got canceled, and there was no backup flight. So in the airport, he went and found a plane and a pilot and whatever, and chartered this flight. I guess he had money at that point from something else already, so he was good. And he paid the charter flight, but there were a bunch of other people who had then gotten stranded on the same flight that he was meant to be on. So he got like a poster board and a marker and put like, alternative flight to the Bahamas, like $40 or whatever, charged these people, and that was it. And like the next day he was like, why can't I do this? And he called Boeing and asked them if they had some used 747s like the next day. And they were like, Mr. Branson, we're going to have someone call you, and that was it. That's how he started Virgin. I mean, talk about big picture problem solving, I'm like,
Mhm.
I love it.
Mhm.
It's pretty awesome.
And the thing is, you show me a neurotypical person who in that situation would be like, you know what, I think I'll buy some airplanes and just start my own airline company. Like that is not how like you're like, damn, this delay sucks. Like I'm never flying American again. Like you are not like, oh.
Not that level of thinking, right? And it's not better or worse. It's just very different, and we need different thinkers in this world.
Mhm.
So it's great.
Yeah,
All
we
right, so
cannot all be starting our own airlines, but we also don't have to look down on the people who see the world that way.
exactly right, because a bunch of people got to the Bahamas that day. Maybe they had hot girls to hook up with too. Who knows?
Or guys. Okay, let's not discriminate.
Okay, very true. True
I
story,
might,
right?
yeah. Yep.
We'll travel for whatever,
Mhm.
So, why is all of this important? Okay, so sometimes just being knowledgeable about something is important because sometimes you have great intentions, but they just need a little bit of fine tuning if you understand the world that you're operating in a little bit, right? Okay, so I have a friend from the co-op that I went to when we lived in North Carolina who has an amazing autistic kiddo, and she puts her head in the sand for the entire month of, I think it's April, right, is Autism Acceptance Month, and she just puts her head in the sand and is like, I'm just going to forget that it exists, right? Because there's so many well-intentioned people out there, and then there's a bunch of people that don't have great intentions too, who are just spouting off about all of this stuff. And it's like, it is her entire existence, right? Her kiddo needs a lot of accommodation and a lot of support. And she's the sweetest, most amazing kiddo. But this is a huge, huge component of this mom's life. So here's the deal. The puzzle piece has become pretty synonymous with autism. You probably see it all the time, right, Amanda? Do you see it on bumper stickers and t-shirts and whatever?
Yeah, it's obviously still floating around some.
Yeah. So the puzzle piece has become synonymous with autism through an organization called Autism Speaks. Most autistic adults have come out and said that they do not speak for us. That is not what we feel. That is not what we think. We don't want their support, right? People have gone so far as to call them a hate group. And so it was interesting because there was a mom locally here who started a group, and she was like, oh, but that's not what the puzzle piece means to me. It means something different to me. And she has an autistic kiddo, and listen, that's your experience. You get to, but I'm like, at the same time, that's kind of like really sticking to your guns in this day and age of being like, no, the swastika to me means health, luck, success, and prosperity from the ancient meaning of the swastika. And I'm like, right, but can we all just agree at this point that unless that's like your heritage faith, the swastika has been hijacked for nefarious purposes, right? And the puzzle piece kind of means the same thing. So even if that's not how you interpret it, it has become a really ugly symbol in the world of autism. And there's a lot of people with great intentions who are slapping puzzle pieces on stuff. I mean, we see it, like it got shared. I'm in a couple of local groups for autistic parents, and people will do like a sensory friendly day at a roller rink or something. That's awesome. Thank you so much, because for my kiddo, that would be necessary. We did sensory friendly day at the fair, which ironically, he didn't really want to go to the fair. We were mainly training his service dog how to get on and off rides so that she could go to Disney World. But in order, because that's a new skill for her. Like anytime you're going to do something, you kind of have to think ahead, like, what is going to be different for her and how can we prepare her for that if it's going to be very, very different. She's not been on a plane yet, and we've actually been taking her to the library and having her go through the detectors that sense the book sensors to get her used to getting ready to go through security at the airport, right? So like anything that's new like that, because she's still, I mean, she's a trained dog, but you're going to get to the airport, she's going to be like, what's this thing? So So anyway, we did sensory friendly day at the fair. All these people, their marketing departments come up with this stuff and they slap puzzle pieces all over it. And it's like, ugh. So all of that, like light it up blue. They like the Empire State Building up blue. That's Autism Speaks. All that stuff is Autism Speaks. If you go on Google and type in Autism Speaks controversy, you will be missing for a week. Okay. It is not a solid organization that we want to be aligning with. Aside from that, let's say you teach at co-op, right? I mean, I always taught at co-op, and mainly because my kids got to register for classes first. Educators had like first pick at classes, so that's why I taught. But for example, there's the thing of like singling a kid out. And yes, you have amazing intentions, but sometimes you're still inadvertently making that kid feel othered. So for example, if you have a dyslexic kiddo in class and you want them to know their read aloud section before the class or whatever, so they have time to preview it, every kid should get their section of reading ahead of time, right? I have a dyslexic kiddo who takes one of my baking classes that I teach online. And whenever she's in class, every single kid in that class gets feedback by video instead of just her, right? Because it adds stress, or it adds like it's kind of like a sour note on her class experience if she's got to struggle through deciphering. I write a lot of feedback. You don't think there's a lot to say about cakes? There's a lot to say about cakes. So I write a lot of feedback. And it's like she's got to sit there and struggle through reading that. I don't want to put a damper. Why? When, again, that's the meeting our neurotypical friends in the middle, right? Why would I create that extra work for her? I'm just going to record it by video and send her a really cheerful message about how awesome she's doing. But I'm not just going to send it to her. Every single kid in that class is going to get it so that she doesn't feel different and the other kids don't go, what's with that kid that she gets something different than us, right? It should be so seamless. So sometimes even when we have great intentions, we just need to kind of take a step back and really, really go like a step further and think about how it affects the whole,
Yeah, no, that's the thing. I think, that's a great example of whether you're doing video feedback or written feedback, and in some cases, obviously, as homeschoolers, we want more written feedback for certain things. But there are other things like the letting kids know when they're going to read that is an easy change to make day in and day out for all of the kids in your class. And it's not just about whether or not they're dyslexic or they're this or they're that, right? I know my kiddo has slow processing speed and slow working memory, and he very much benefits from the like knowing which paragraph is going to be his, because if they're immediately called on in class, or like even that idea that like we call on kids and they have to be able to answer right away. You don't have to have a specific diagnosis of something for that to be problematic. And why? Like where is the value in making kids feel bad about themselves while they're supposed to be learning? Like there's no value. And there are these like really small little things that are like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, when was the last time you were in a meeting for work and the person presenting started like pointing at people and saying, you tell me the answer to this? Like, that's not how it works, because you're a grown up and you realize that some people know and some people don't. And like, you get nothing out of like embarrassing people on the spot. Okay, look, there are some awful bosses that do get something out of embarrassing people on the spot, and we all know that they're awful bosses and they're awful people, and we don't respect them. Like you don't teach that way. If you don't like a boss that treats you that way, like don't be the teacher, don't be the person doing it. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, and then just another quick note about like communication, right? Autistic individuals in particular, but all other neurodivergents also, like idioms. Autism and idioms do not go together, right? At all, right? Cool as a cucumber. They're like, neither of us are cucumbers. I don't understand, right? Like, so, and in general, right, interpersonal relationships thrive on clear communication. So just the more we know, the more smoothly all of these relationships, the foundation of these relationships becomes stronger, the more we know. Another reason why this becomes so important is because it is, if you have a neurotypical kid or a neurodivergent kid, we must acknowledge that the playing field is not level, right? And listen, we're a progressive podcast. We're going to let you know the playing field isn't level on all fronts, right? Women don't make as much as men. Acceptance to college is, the playing field isn't level in most places, right? And we're working towards equality on so many fronts. But for neurotypical or for neurodivergent people, especially in the workplace, it can be very, very challenging, right? ADHD individuals are 30% more likely to have chronic unemployment issues. The rate of unemployment for dyslexic individuals is even higher. It's about 45% in the US, at least nationwide. Studies have shown an average gap of 30% between autistic employees and their neurotypical counterparts. I don't know about your previous career life, Amanda, your spouse's previous career life. Like, I know for my husband, a ton of work is schmoozing, right? It's dinner, it's drinks, it's golfing, it's this and that. Guess who's going to potentially struggle there more than others? Mm-hmm. And how is that going to, it trickles over into so many things. It's up for our kids to kind of start to close that gap a little bit as they come into the next generation, as they become people in the workforce, people who are hiring managers, people who work in HR, all of these things, to kind of close that gap and to understand the innate talents that people have and to hire for their talents and to meet them in the middle. It's such a huge thing for our world to grow and for our society to kind of close in that gap a little bit, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So that kind of wraps up our main topic for the day, but we'd love to extend an invitation to you. If you're not already part of our Facebook group, come and join us. If you search Homeschool Moms Unfiltered, you'll find 2 pages. You'll find our public page, and then you'll find our group. You can join the group. We chat about all things homeschooling. We have some fun. Bring a friend, the more the merrier. There's so many homeschool groups out there, and some of them have really toxic environments. I just unfollowed one this morning that I was so over. I'm like, I'll stay in it because I like to be able to like share the podcast there sometimes or whatever, but the environment is just so terrible. And so that's not the environment we are building. So come join us, have some fun. It'll be great. So Amanda, we've got our next piece. You've got a recommended resource for us. Here we go.
Recommended resources. Do you need more homeschool supplies? No. Are you going to want these anyway? Absolutely.
Yay. What you got for us?
So this one is actually a little different. All right. So this week's resource is a free webinar that I am presenting as part of the Bougie in a Backpack Virtual Travel Summit. Okay. So it's this weekend, August 9th to the 11th, 2024. I'll be presenting Homeschooling Around the World on a Budget. So it's a talk aimed at inspiring you with some world schooling ideas and specific suggestions, both for keeping costs down and resources and curriculum that travel well. The link to register for free can be found on our social media pages and probably in the podcast description here below. But if you're listening to this after mid-August 2024, be sure to check out our website or social media pages for ways to access the presentation and the free resource guides that I talk about. They'll be available for subscribers and followers. So there'll be a way for you to access it for free if you miss the free window. If there's more in the Bougie in a Backpack Travel Summit that you're like all about and you want to know about all of it, then by all means, feel free to go crazy over there and pay for their biggest package with all of the stuff. But if you're just interested in how to get the show on the road with some world schooling or part-time world schooling like we do, this might be of interest to you, and you can participate in real time during the seminar or the webinar, or you can listen later on. We'd love to have you.
I'm there for it. I'm super excited. I am up for any travel adventure all the time, and I'm always looking for tips because we are not mega millionaires. And so any way that I can make travel more accessible and less expensive, I'm in. So I'm excited. I can't wait.
Yeah, no, that's it. Right. And that's what I really talk about. So, the reality is sometimes things are expensive. I'm not going to lie. We did a 3-week trip. We went to Lapland and we did Santa Claus World and Paris and Belgium, and we had this amazing, and it was a stupid expensive trip, right? There's no getting around the fact that going to Lapland, like, it's just, people are like, how do I do it on a budget? And the groups are always like, Finland on a budget's not really gonna happen. Like it is what it is. And you have to pick and choose where you're gonna spend your money and how long you save for these kinds of trips. But there are other things that people think cost a fortune and they don't, right? So we did a month in Ethiopia and Madagascar, and for an entire month, airfare, hotel stays, tours, trips, all of the things, food, all of it, an entire month, it was under $3,000 for two people, for me and my kiddo, right? And most people would assume that it was significantly more.
Right.
I kid you not, I went to the dentist right before because I was like, oh, I have a little bit of a broken tooth, like a chipped tooth, and I want to make sure I'm not going to have any problems while I'm traveling. And they were like, oh, we could start on it next week. And I was like, actually, I'm going to be out of town at the end of next week and I don't want to do anything to it. Like, if it doesn't have to be messed with, I don't want to do anything before I leave the country for a month because I'm going on this amazing trip. And I kind of told them about it because I was really excited, right? And they absolutely got the wrong impression. And they like gave me this like medical treatment plan for $18,000. I was like, do you know how many times I could travel around the world for $18,000? Like, this is not like, so yeah, my goal is definitely to help inspire people and help them see like you can see amazing things and do amazing things. And it actually does not have to cost anywhere near what you think it does.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I totally agree. So we travel a lot and it's always on a dime. But I'm looking forward to your tip because I'll incorporate them with what I'm already doing and I'll get even better at it. So I'm super excited at it.
Yes.
Very cool.
All right. So I think that pretty much wraps up our episode today. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to wrap us up with our mantra for the week. So, homeschooling, where empathy grows, differences are celebrated, and inclusion is a way of life.
I love it. And I will speak on behalf of our viewers and say that I'm very happy that you didn't quit the podcast this morning, Amanda, because I had a lot of fun chatting about neurodivergence with you today. So I'm very glad that instead you made a cup of tea and slapped on some makeup and came to chat with us.
Pulled up my big girl panties and showed up.
But we all have those days. So
we do.
Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone, and happy homeschooling.
Yeah. Have a great one.